So my guest joining me here today in the lovely venue of the Riverbank Arts Centre here in Kildare is one of Ireland's leading economic commentators. He's also a multi-talented, working as a broadcaster, best-selling author, and now he has us in a theatre in Ireland. So, David, tell us why we're here in a theatre in Kildare.
Because I think, Laura, that economics is far too essential and important to be left to economists and to be left to academics. And one of the ways you can communicate, as historically has always been the case, is in theatres. So it struck me last year when the Irish Parliament turned into a theatre, that the Irish theatre should turn into a parliament. And this is what we're doing. So the show began in the Abbey, and we sold out for about 31 nights, which was extraordinary. Now we're bringing it around the country, and we're here in Newbridge, and again with a full house. And the idea is to communicate with people, to say, this is the way the world works. Don't be afraid of economics. In actual fact, let's learn about it. Let's disseminate a message, and then people can decide, particularly as we have an election coming up in the next 10 or 11 weeks, who they're going to vote for and why. So it's worked fantastically well. It's been great. It's good fun as well.
So I believe you got a really good reaction here in the Riverbank Arts Centre in Kildare last night. So people might now be looking towards you as someone who could run for one of these positions. And would you put your money where your mouth is and go into politics and say, look, this needs to change and I'm going to change it?
Well, I think, there does come a time, I have to talk to my missus about this, right? She can't be talking to Kildare TV first and then she sees it on the internet, she says, did what? You did what? No, I think that, look, the interesting thing about the whole tour, not just last night in Newbridge, but all over the country, has been this visceral demand for a change. And I'm prepared to do my bit for it. There's no doubt of that. But Laura, more interesting, what would you do? Because you're of the generation. Would you run for politics? Would you even think of doing something or forming, if a new movement started? Would you be interested?
Maybe if I had you as my secretary or something by my side, I'd be asking you for all the tips.
Well, Laura, in that case, I will be by your side, and we can do it together. I mean, the whole point is that you can create people's movements, but you need people. You don't just need ideas or individuals like me who maybe have written the books and been on TV and done all that. You also need a grassroots movement. So, if you're keen and the rest of the viewers of Kildare TV are keen, well then let's do it.
Do you want to set up just a party? We'll set up our own.
Just the two of us here, yeah.
That's it. McWilliams and McCabe, that'd be fine. Sounds good.
The two Macs, yeah, exactly. We could work the whole thing out. It'd be perfect. Why not?
So the show is called The Outsiders. Where did the idea originally come for the name of the show? And anyway, there's comedy parts and then there's discussion parts of it. Where did this all come
Well,
about?
actually, the comedy side came from presenting the panel last year. I was presenting the panel. It was quite weird because I was this straight man economist surrounded by these lunatics on either side of me, and I had to keep a straight face during the whole thing. But it struck me, talking to some of the stand-up comedians, that they were incredibly literate on economics. They'd sit down, like Andrew Maxwell and Neil Delmere wouldn't talk to me about comedy. They'd sit down and we'd talk about the economy, and they'd talk to me how does it work. And then it struck me that what we could do, the best way to communicate, because I've always thought the people I remember most in life are the people who make me laugh, and the people who see the world in a sort of a funny, obscure way. But by telling unusual stories, you soften up the ground to actually deliver quite difficult messages. So the idea there was to use a certain amount of comedy to give people the permission then to listen to ideas that may be a wee bit more difficult to accept and more edgy in the sense of this is what we've got to do. So that was one of the sides. The outsiders, the idea outsiders has always come to me from the idea that I believe that Ireland really splits between not rich and poor or young or old or men or women. It actually splits between insiders and outsiders. And in a crisis, the insiders actually get stronger in Ireland, even though they've caused the crisis. And the outsiders, usually the young, the unemployed, those forced to emigrate, are told in every crisis. When I was a teenager in the 80s, everybody in our road emigrated. All the bigger, what we used to call them the big lads, they all went, right? And the big girls, they all went. And what struck me was that the Irish political, social and economic establishment doesn't care about Irish people, actually doesn't care. So when things go bad, your generation now is told, well, do you know what, just go to Australia or go to London or get out of our sight, but don't cause any hassle. So I believe the outsiders are the people in Ireland who suffer all the time. And they're not necessarily, it's not necessarily the very poor, but it's actually those who don't have a stake in the society. Either they haven't built it yet, or they've been excluded. So the performance is about liberating the power of the outsiders and destroying the power of the insiders, which is what we have to do.
And when you're mentioning the outsiders in different groups, do you think now, in the recent light of the increasing of the student fees and everyone going to university now, some people can't afford it, but like there could be also the opinion that students might leave a very comfortable life and it's all very cosy in a university being late, you know what I mean? Do you think they would be now considered outsiders or?
No, I think that the issue is very simple, is that if you start charging for education, now I come from the generation that paid for education, and it was always very clear to me when I went to Trinity that the catchment area of Trinity was from the pretty well off, no matter how you spun it. And one of the reasons of that is that poor people, A, can't afford it, and B, they need role models. This is the whole interesting thing. I've been always fascinated the role that role models play. If somebody who lives next door to you, for the first time ever, goes to university, this is never heard of on your road, then suddenly if you're 14 or 15, you say, that's achievable, that's possible. Then you go, and then your mates go, and what you do is you change the dynamic. And that's the most important thing, I think, that social policy can do. So if, for example, student fees, or abolishing them in the 1990s, allowed people to go to university who never did go, well, then they created a kind of a self-propelling dynamic in their own communities. So now are students too well off? I liked your yellow t-shirts. They were very funky on the thing. Very, very nice choreography. It was very, very well done. But no, I mean, if students don't protest, who's going to protest?
Do you think it's a privilege then to go to college and university and to get those degrees?
I think it is a privilege, but I don't mean it's a privilege in the sense. It's a privilege to be able to do that. Okay? But the objective of all our society and of all economics should be, Laura, to educate people to a level that their parents weren't educated. That should be that's progress. And if we can do that, I think that's what we should do.
Okay, and then just another different question. At times like this, when everything's getting very depressing and kind of there's all talk about the economy's got no money and stuff, do you think it's better to go out and enjoy the arts, such as your show, instead of sitting at home and being like, no, I'll save the money? And I think it's better, not just your show in particular, but any show to enjoy yourself and to go out and enjoy the arts.
Absolutely. I mean, what's very, very interesting in Ireland is that about 8 years ago, when Electric Picnic started, John Reynolds, who runs Electric Picnic, rang me, and he had the strangest request. I've known him for a long, long time, and he said, would you do a documentary on Electric Picnic, together with a guy called Nick Seymour, who was the bass player of an Australian band called Crowded House. And I said, yeah, but John, I'm a nerd. I know nothing about rock and roll. I'm good at songs. That's what I do for a living. You can't be destroying your cred by having the likes of me involved in this thing. But what was interesting about that Electric Picnic, and we've done it every year since then, is that we've had a political tent every year in the Electric Picnic, which is jammed all the time. And talking to stand-up comedians and performers of all sorts, what is really vibrant in Ireland is the spoken word, the one-man show, the arts. People are turning out in their thousands to see gigs and events and to speak. I mean, this tour has been sold out. We could have sold it out 2 or 3 times over in every venue. So it's absolutely essential that people come out and see it. And the other side of things is that, Laura, the time to be most optimistic is when everyone else is depressed. And the time to be depressed is when everyone else is most optimistic. This is the key to life. So, for example, a couple of years ago, when everybody was buying houses all around Kildare for multiples of their salary, and I came out and I wrote a book called The Pope's Children, and the message in that was just, this thing can't last. That it's all very effervescent now and everyone's having a good laugh, but the economics doesn't make any sense. Now then, when everybody was so optimistic, everyone said, oh, your man McWilliams is all doom and gloom. Jeez, I'd hate to go for a pint with him. He's very depressing.
Can't win, can you?
So, yeah, you can't win. But that's the time to see things. And now when everyone's down in the dumps and feeling really down about ourselves, now's the time to say, we can change this country. And we can do it together. This is the key, that this is our country. It's not their country. It's not the politician's country. It's not some sort of Taoiseach or Brian Cowan. It's not his country. It's our country. And when we're down, that is the moment to be most confident about the future, because then you can actually put in place policies and movements that change things. So we should be hopeful, but there is a difference between hope and optimism. Optimism is this blind belief in the future. So as my mother say, it'll be grand, right? Okay, but hope is when you actually do something today to ensure that the future can be optimistic. And I believe that there is huge hope in the country, and it can be done. It can be turned around.
The majority of the changes that you talk about is kind of like you want everyone to kind of keep going and evolving and stuff in Ireland. And what we do here in Kildare TV is maybe the majority of people, maybe my age, won't be reading newspapers, won't be able to catch up on what's going on, and they don't really know what's going on in their country. So people watching the show now might be like, okay, this is a new way of maybe viewing the news or see what's going on.
Well, I think it's fantastic. I mean, the whole I mean, you know, about a year ago, or maybe a wee bit earlier than that, I opened a Twitter account because one of the researchers on the panel said, Jesus, Macker, you don't have a Twitter account? You got to have a Twitter account. Okay, whatever a Twitter account is. Right? And now there's 15,000 followers on that. So you're communicating with a totally different type of person. My website has been up and running for a long time. And again, there's a huge amount of followers on that and on Facebook. And what we've got to realise is that the message is the same, but the mode of communication has to change. And what Kildare TV is doing is fantastic because you're hitting a different audience who, as you said, won't go out and buy the Indo or the Irish Times or whatever. Couldn't be bothered. They probably don't even watch any current affairs programmes. But if you use a combination of comedy and different types of people to communicate a message to them, they will respond. And they are responding, and you're evidence of that.
So back to your show quickly. How have the government reacted to your show? Have you got any?
Oh yeah, they can't stand it.
Really?
Yeah, very simple.
I'm not really surprised. But
Yeah, they can't stand it, but they can't stand me. But I mean, but that's been the case for many years. So I think that's actually quite a privilege. It's an honour not to be liked by those guys. In actual fact, I think the seal of death is to be liked by those characters. And you know, they're yesterday's men. They'll be gone next week or in a few months' time. You hear them blustering around now. I saw Brian Cow the other day trying to bully Miriam O'Callaghan, and then all the Fianna Fáil says that was a great performance.
Okay, yeah.
That was like a drunk bloke in a bar.
Yeah.
You know, shouting at a woman. So I think that the state doesn't like the truth. It's very simple.
And do you think it's criminal what they've done?
Well, the guards think it's criminal what they've done in Anglo-Irish because there's a criminal investigation going on. I think it is criminally irresponsible of a set of individuals or a government to destroy an economy. That's as bad as you can get, you know? And they've done that very successfully. In actual fact, Fianna Fáil, in this iteration, this government, have destroyed more wealth in our country than the Brits ever did in 800 years. Think about it. They were given a platform by the Irish people, which in 2000 was probably as good as you could get. And they destroyed the place. And you, not me, you and even your kids, if you ever have kids, will be paying for it. And that is pretty serious stuff. So we have an election, so I presume the opportunity now is for all of us, you know, anybody who's of voting age to go out and vote differently. Yeah,
I think that's a very good message because it's just very important to get your say and that you have your vote, so use it. Like, why? It's just
1.5 million people have looked at the Rubber Bandits video in the last 3 days, mainly in Ireland. Think about that, right? So, which is pretty good actually, it must be said, right? The idea of having a horse outside of a wedding is pretty good. But the point is, right, it can be done. You can mobilise people if you just get them interested. And how you get them interested is you use various different ways of communicating that speak to people. And humour is one of them. And the other one's the truth, because actually all we have is the truth. And once the truth gets obscured, then the message gets obscured. So if you have the truth and a way of delivering it, I'm very confident.
Okay, and you made you mentioned there that you made kind of predictions in your book, The Generation Game.
Yes,
I'm going to ask you now, what do you think the state of Ireland is going to be in about a year? Time next year, what do you think it will be?
I think the recovery in Ireland can start very, very soon. But I think what we've got to do is we've got to have the balls actually to negotiate with the European Union in a much more aggressive way. And by that, I don't mean aggressive in terms of snapping at people, but I think actually knowing what we want. So, for example, the big problem is that the banks are now more or less one and the same as the country. So we've got to sever the links between the banks because the banks are completely delinquent. AIB, Bank of Ireland, of course Anglo is bust completely, right? Irish Nationwide. You go out here to Newbridge on the main street and all the banks are bust. Every single one of them. And we shouldn't pay for them. We should actually sever them, put them over here, maybe create a new bank. Once we do that, there's nothing to worry about. This country has nothing to fear at all, really, except fear itself. We have nothing to worry about because we have the right generation who can do things. We're still a reasonably rich country. It's still a reasonably productive country. Mm-hmm. And all we've got to do is do 2 or 3 things correctly, and we'll be fine. And not only fine, in actual fact, sometimes it's like everything. When you come through a crisis, you're a much stronger person on the other side. But most of us, it's like you know, when you're breaking it off with people. I've always found when I was younger, right? The whole fear is actually breaking it off with them, right? So it's like, how did I do that? And oh my God, it's not me, it's you, it's not you, it's me, and all that sort of stuff. And then you do it and it's over. And everybody recovers after a while.
And you can learn from it.
And you can learn from it, and you know, and you move on. And this is an economic crisis, the same thing. It's just like breaking up. You do it and you move on.
Well, fingers crossed that'll be the idea of the government anyway, that'll be the mentality of people in Ireland.
But you've got to vote, Laura.
I will, promise, now that you've convinced me. Thanks very much for coming in today to Kildare to talk to me.
It was a pleasure. I'll come back again. Will you have me?
This time next year we'll come back and have a follow-up interview and see what happens.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much.
Cheers, thank you.
Every time you wanna feel free in your